Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and WeissAdvice here on YouTube. Welcome to the Worth It series where I discuss companies' products and whether or not I would recommend them to you. Okay. In this video, we're going to do things a little bit differently here. I'm going to be talking about a smaller plugin company, and so some of the rules that I've sort of set up for myself don't exactly apply. So I'm going to be changing around my rating rubric and kind of playing it fast and loose because honestly, the rating thing is just for funsies. The recommendation and the context is what's important. The other thing is I would like to do some demonstration at the end of this. I think doing a little bit of product demo as well as dropping a few tips might make this a little bit more interesting, and I want to also add on that there was no sponsorship of any sort for this video. I'm only doing this because I like the company, I'm interested in it, and I want to share that with you. Okay, the company is TDR Labs. They've been around for a while, at least since 2008 when I was chopping it up with Fabian over on Future Producers. That forum, it's still out there, but I don't really know Fabian all that well. I just know that he's been doing TDR for a minute, but it's not one of these companies that's like Waves or Plugin Alliance that are so huge the knowledge of them is almost kind of ubiquitous. They're a little bit more under the radar and starting to get a little bit more popularity now, and so I think it's maybe worth talking about them. Okay, so in my rubric of evaluating things, the first thing I always talk about is sound quality, and I think as far as sound quality goes, everything that TDR Labs is doing is excellent. I think the sound quality is great, and there is a specific thing that I really, really like. So when it comes to plugins, there tends to be two major camps when it comes to how the designer approaches the thought process of getting the plugin together. One is the utilitarian approach, where the plugin designer goes, okay, the engineer is going to need to accomplish something. I want to make sure that I give them the most thorough and easy to use tools in order to do a specific task as accurately as they can. Okay, that's great. Then there are other plugin designers who say, I want to make this an artistic experience. I want to emulate a certain piece of gear that might have some limitations or has a very specific sound that will sometimes work and sometimes not work. And they'll look at it more in that kind of like egalitarian, is that the right word? I'm not really sure, sort of sense, and go for a more artistic approach, and sometimes even compromise workflow deliberately to enhance the artistic version of the approach. Yeah, okay, we'll go with that. Those sentences were okay. Fabian and his team at TDR Labs, I feel like, has a really, really good instinct for balancing and marrying those two ideas. And so you get these plugins where the approach feels very utilitarian, but the result and the experience feels very artistic. So the sound quality in my mind is great. I will throw one little asterisk beside that, and that is that some of the saturations are very, very distinct and do not necessarily play well with sources that are already a little bit maybe distorted, saturated, or colored from, say, like, like a small boxy room or something like that. When you have cleaner sources, the saturations are pretty much always a hit. When the sources are dirty, sometimes the saturations don't play so nice. I feel like that's not exactly even a criticism of TDR specifically. I think a lot of devices that is true. Sometimes you will run into saturations that just seem to always work, even if the source is like kind of grungy, but that's on the rarer side. But generally speaking, that's an easy 5 out of 5 for me. And moving on to workflow, I would say is also a 5 out of 5. Like I said, Fabian has a really, really good sense of balancing both the artistic side of this stuff with the utilitarian stuff. And this is something where I don't feel like you really need a user manual to figure out what everything is doing. The sounds that you get are almost always good no matter what you're doing, and everything feels very intuitive to me. Plus, the stuff runs flawlessly, even on Pro Tools, which is like a minor miracle. So, workflow, 5 out of 5. Okay. Customer care, this is where things go a little off the rails because I don't have enough experience with TDR to be able to comment on their customer care. My sense of Fabian and my sense of what they're doing leads me to believe that they're probably great with customer service, but I cannot say that for sure. I really just don't know. So just keep in mind that while trying this, that one is a mystery box for me. Okay. Similarly, going off the rails here is selection, right? One of my rubric things is selection. How comprehensive is a product line? Could I mix an entire record with only the plugins in that line. But the thing is when evaluating smaller companies, it almost feels like that's a very loaded category because inherently they're smaller. They have smaller product lines. So it's more important to talk about what is there rather than what isn't. If I were going to give it a star rating, I'd probably give it a lower star rating because it's just, there's only like 6 or 7 plugins and, you know, they leave a lot of things up in the air. I don't know, feels weird. So I'm going to kind of leave that one off too. Price is going to be the last one that I give a little star rating to, and honestly, it's 6 out of 5. Well, we're going to go with 5 out of 5, but really it's 6 out of 5 because they do something that I think is really unique and really, really incredible. All of their plugins, or not all of their plugins, but most of their plugins have a free-to-use version. It's a feature-limited version of the actual for-sale plugin, but unlike most companies that do this, it's actually really thoroughly useful. You can get the free feature-limited version and only use that, and you are getting a fully functional, usable plugin. A lot of companies will give you like a free version of the plugin that really doesn't have any features, but it's barely usable. I don't particularly care for that. That feels like baiting a little bit. But this is different. This is like, if you don't want to pay for these plugins and you just want to get them for free, you're going to get usable plugins. When I go into the demonstration, I'm only using the free versions that were available. All that said, if you want to buy the more feature unlimited versions, they're not that expensive. They're like 50 euros by average. So price is like, I almost question the wisdom of doing this. Like it almost feels like maybe for a company, they might be being a little bit too friendly in terms of price, but I'm not going to complain. So yeah, price 5 out of 5. Of all the rating things I did, 15 out of 15. Do I recommend? I would say that you would be remiss not to go over to TokyoDawnLabs.com, I want to say. I'm not sure. Somebody can correct me in the comments. Go over to Tokyo Dawn Labs and download the free versions of the plugins. There's a chance it might not be for you. You're not going to be out anything. But honestly, they're pretty great. So yeah, I feel like it's kind of a must check out. Okay, with all that said, let's do a little bit of demonstration here. Let's discuss some techniques. So I'm going to play a little bit of this record. It's from an artist named Abby Ahmad and her producer, Mark Marshall. They're fantastic. Definitely check them out. This is kind of like a little bit of a blues rock thing, and so that's going to kind of give me the direction that I'm going with this. Okay, let's play it down.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. 'Cause time's of the essence, click goes the clock, paralyzed in its presence, you're ticked by the time.
All right, cool. I almost forgot to, I didn't put on my reverb effects. Okay, I'm going to play one more second of it.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride.
Gotta have the vocal reverb, my bad there. Okay, so my first tip is before you mix, and I talk about this all the time on WeissAdvice because it is like the most quintessential important thing when it comes to mixing, envision what you want the emotional effect to be. That is so important because you cannot figure out if you're doing it right if you don't know what you're trying to get the listener to hear. So for this record, this feels like some kind of like, I want to hear like a sweaty recording studio with like carpet on the walls where everything is just kind of in the red a little bit and the AC unit isn't totally working. I want it to have a sort of stank to it. Like it needs to feel like a southern bar where they're playing nothing but blues rock. And I don't know if I've really completely accomplished that, to be honest. I think that the feel is not quite 100% there, but I think that there's a few things that I did that really do lend it in that direction. And, you know, we're going to talk about that stuff. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the drums. I'm going to bypass all my effects on the drums real quick and play it.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride.
Now, I do think that there is something cool about just leaving the drums completely raw. If I were to throw a trim plug on here, maybe add like 2.5 dB a level, maybe 3 dB a level.
Come Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. 'Cause time's of the essence.
That feels pretty good to me. Like it doesn't not work, but it certainly feels like the drums are a little bit on the thin side, particularly the snare. The cymbals are a little bit too dark, so they're kind of falling backwards a little bit, and I'm not getting the cymbal action that I want. And it's bluesy sounding, but it's not rocky sounding enough. Rock would be a little bit more face forward, and so I want to get that evocation out of it. So here's with my processing on.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. 'Cause time's of the essence.
All right, so my first tip here is going to be to start with your drum bus when you're working with acoustic drums. Generally, you really want to just hit these key points here and get the overall curve down. So if I bypass all of my effects and then I just bring on this one effect here, just this one EQ, you're going to hear a significant amount change.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. 'Cause time's of the essence. Click goes the clock, paralyzed in its presence. You're ticked by the time.
So much of the drum sound is coming from just that, because it's bringing in the cymbals that I need and the bite from the snare that I need, and that was the main thing that I was missing. So just doing this general tone curve here, that's a really good starting place, and then I can figure out all of the nuances of the drums in between. The next thing I want to talk about is bus compression here. So with bus compression, I really like just pulverizing the living snot out of the drum bus to figure out what kind of feel I want. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to stick with it. It just gives me a good idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. So the way that I like to do that, I usually like to just turn the attack really fast, keep the release at kind of in the medium area. Usually I go harder knee with a compressor on drum bus as a starting point, and then the ratio can be kind of whatever. I usually go a little bit higher than 4-to-1. I'll do something more like a 10-to-1 kind of ratio, 8-to-1, 12-to-1, depending on what the compressor allows. But this is just so that I can really start figuring out the action of the compressor and digging into what I'm trying to get from it. And then it's just a matter of finding the threshold where it's giving me the action that I want.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride.
So like, for example, I know that I kind of like that splatty snare sound. Everything else that this compressor is doing I hate, but the splat from the snare is kind of cool. So I think I need to get something that's a little bit more honest with the attack. You know, right now it feels like it's just like over pulverizing the drums, and maybe get the sidechain in here to ease up on the kicks. So I'm going to put the sidechain maybe at like 80 hertz and start slowing the attack down.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. 'Cause time's of the essence. Click goes the clock, paralyzed in its presence. You're ticked by the time.
Yeah, okay, I like this attack slowed down a little bit. Keep in mind it's drums, so even a 10 millisecond attack is actually significantly slower than going for like the 0 millisecond attack, because drums just go by so quick. Now I'm going to do like a really fast release, just to get an idea of how that feels.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope.
It's not bad. Let's go for like a really slow release.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope.
I kind of like the slower release. I feel like it's making a pulling action here, and I bet I could get even a little bit more of that if I soften the knee a little bit. You got to be careful with softening knees on compressors, because it can sometimes affect the feel of the attack.
Come teeter the tightrope, rally your pride, straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence.
Yeah, listen to what the kick and the bass do together, actually.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the
That dome to me feels really good with this kind of setting, so I feel like I'm going in the right direction. In fact, I feel like this is not even totally wrong, although the ratios may be a little bit too heavy, like we're doing a little too much compression. But the actual action of the compression, I'm really, really liking. Now, one of the things I really love about this compressor, and I cannot stress how brilliant I think this is this little weird Greek letter thing here. What this is doing, to my ear at least, is changing the attack and release curves. So the attack and release time is the rate of gain reduction, but the attack and release curve is the shape of that reduction. So for example, if you're talking about a purely digital compressor, you might be talking about a completely linear attack and release time, meaning no matter how much gain reduction is being applied, the speed is the same. But if you were to talk about something like an optical compressor, optical compressors have this really interesting natural way of being a little bit more gradual in terms of their gain reduction at first, and then gain reduction speeds up as it increases, which creates this kind of curve thing that happens in the attack, and then it does the opposite in the release. So I believe what's happening here is that the alpha to beta settings go from purely linear attack time to what's more or less an optical attack time. And then as you start going from beta to sigma, I think sigma does something really weird. I think you get this very kind of S-shaped, and I think this is why it's called sigma, this S-shaped kind of attack and release curve where it's very gradual at first, then a very steep drop off, and then kind of gradual again. And you get this really interesting sound in the release and this really interesting preservation in the attack. And so once you've got the attack and release timing more or less where you want it, you can then kind of further get a flavor from going from alpha to sigma or anywhere in between.
straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence. Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence.
Like here, I think the beta setting is giving me this very sort of like spongy snare with a little bit more definition in the attack, and similarly doing something kind of nice for the kick. Let's go all the way up to sigma.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence.
You hear that really weird quality in the release? It's kind of cool, actually. Like, I feel like if I was doing something in parallel with a faster release, like if I did something like this.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride.
And then with like a faster attack.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence.
In parallel, that's going to sound fire. I'll throw in the dry mix at 50%. This is going to sound so cool.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence. Click goes the clock, paralyzed in its presence. You're ticked by the time. Are you?
I would have to refine it a little bit more once I get the parallel thing going, but it's a cool vibe for sure. But I'm going to keep on the track that I was originally on here just to see where I go with it. I'm thinking that going sigma with these exact attack and release timing, it feels a little weird to me. It's a little jarring. So let's go somewhere between like the beta and alpha settings.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence. Click goes the clock.
I like that. I think we can even keep the ratio pretty high. I'm going to back it off some, but I think that a pretty hard ratio is going to work here.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence. Click goes the clock, paralyzed in its presence. You're ticked by the time.
Now, this is completely different than the settings I originally got. The settings I originally got are... Oh, look at that. It's actually a lot more toward the sigma side of things. It's almost completely there, and it's got that much faster release, which I think is interesting. So this is my original settings here.
Straddle that steep slope, lengthen your stride. This time's of the essence. Click goes the clock, paralyzed in its presence. You're ticked by the talk. Are you up for the mission? In for the ride?
Here's going to be my last tip for this video. The key to getting it right is just not thinking about it, but just let your body tell you whether or not it's right. So I like this one, and the reason I know I like this one is because the way that I groove with the record, the way that my body wants to move with it, it feels more engaged. It feels like it's part of the record more, and so this is speaking to me better. I don't think that there's necessarily a right or wrong here. I think all of us are going to have a different intrinsic reaction to how we feel a groove and hear a groove, but you want to stay, it's a little hippy-dippy, but you want to stay kind of like open-minded and just allowing the music to come through you and not thinking about it, but just feeling it in your physical body in order to find that movement that works. That's what works for me, at least. So, okay, I'd like to wrap up here. If you dig this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification so you get notified. Also, if you want to dig really deep into these techniques and get a very thorough understanding of how to explore the creative and technical aspects of mixing, check out WeissAdvice.com. The link to that will be in the description below. And lastly, you know what we say here at Weiss Advice. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.